Welcome back to Close Mode. I'm here with Brian Dietmeyer, the master of strategic negotiation, and author of the book with the same title. And I'm excited to close out this 4-part series on the process of strategic negotiation. I'm a rookie, so I have a lot to learn, and we've walked through the process of estimating at the beginning, signaling and validation in the middle, and then moving on to how to use all the information you gather at the front end in order to create more value. But Brian, what you talked about in the last episode that I was I was fascinated when you said it, but I held back my questions for this episode, is on how to divide value. And at first I was like, what the heck? What if we're adding value, why the heck would we want to divide it? Like, what's the point of that? It seems like we're taking value off the table and therefore justifying a smaller price. But I know you have something good up your sleeve here. So tell us all, like, what do you mean now that we've created value and we have 3 different offers on the table that are customized for them? What are we doing to divide value in order to win a better deal?
Yeah, and that's sort of the fourth I talked about in the previous section about, you have those 3 sort of business relationships that you're putting on the table, and you're co-creating the fourth. When you're co-creating the fourth, that's what most people would call negotiation. This is where you and I are horse trading, right? About what goes into that fourth option. And so there's a couple of concepts I want to talk about here. One is from the kind of negotiation literature called anchoring and adjustment. So the sort of academic part of anchoring and adjustment is whatever first offer is put on the table. What you tend to do, think of it as a dart being thrown as a board, and all subsequent offers are in relation to that dart. In fact, my old business partner, Max Bazerman from Harvard, says that the opening offer has more impact on final outcomes than all subsequent counter offers combined. So I can give you a quick example. I like cars and boats and stuff with engines, and I was buying a 1955 Chevy Apache truck. If you've ever seen the old Ralph Lauren ads of, a woman in her riding clothes leaning up against a cool old truck, it's that kind of truck. And so I was buying it, and I think the list price, I think the guy had it at like $24,000 or something. And I went out and did research on other 55 Chevy trucks available. And this was kind of show quality. This wasn't one I had to rehab. And I'm like, wow, $24K. And the average market price out there was about 12. A good one was probably closer to 15. But what I found is that I remember literally sitting on my front porch thinking about my counter to them. And my counter was relative to this 24K. And I had to, in my own mind, make this switch to go, I have to literally delete that. I have to ignore that 24,000 because it's nothing more than a made up high number, and I'm going to end up something less than that high number. So I had to completely re-anchor on 12,000, which was saying, this is my alternative. This is my consequence of no agreement, is literally said to the broker who was selling an entire car collection on behalf of an actor from the show Taxi, by the way. And I had to go back and say, here's my 6 other alternatives. And one of them showed the trophies from the shows that they had won and said, take this back to your seller. Because the broker was like, the seller's just convinced this is worth it. That helped. And so we changed that anchor and began talking more about the 12 to 14 range. So that's just an important piece in the tactical part of dividing value, is being very, very aware of anchors. Anchors are not only numbers. They are sort of what is it that you're selling and the customer's buying. They're going to try to commoditize it. And we need to think about, am I buying a widget, or am I buying the output that widget gives me, right? We're anchoring on the widget or the output. We're anchoring on the price or all the other commercial terms together. So anchoring is a very important part of this tactical divide value thing. Be aware of them, use them proactively, realize how you react to them as well. So those 2 uses. So I mentioned earlier that 97% of buyer dialogue falls into 2 categories. We already know they're going to refer to their alternative. We already know they're going to put price pressure on us or some kind of giveaway pressure. The most common tactic globally being, I can get the same thing from someone else cheaper. So when these things are flying, this is when we're dividing the value that maybe we're trying to build in that, in that fourth offer. And so we respond to both of these tactics similarly. The first thing we have to do is counter same thing, right? By starting to talk about, we can't talk about cheaper, by the way. I'll give you another example of a tech company we worked with. We coached $1 billion in renewals for them over the course of a year. And the most common tactic from the customer trying to divide value was, I just won't renew. And our customer called that going dark, right? All of my customers were threatening to go dark. I'm just not going to renew unless you give me this new license price. And they started panicking about the license price. And it's like, forget the license price. Let's do this analysis of what go dark looks like for all these different customers. We've got 10 huge renewals coming up. There was varying degrees of pain for them to go dark. Some, you know what? They could. It's not going to be too painful. These other customers, based on the business scenario, it's going to be painful. So when responding to those categories of tactics, it's the same response. They might be taking one thing out of the alternative analysis to say, well, their speed to market's faster than you. That's true. Let's broaden it to all the other things. When you put us side by side with the competitor, how important are those things? Same thing, price. It's one item, zero sum. Broaden it to, okay, cool. Let's talk about price. How about expanding the term or the volume, or changing payment terms or something, or length of contract. So with both, they're usually taking one piece out of context of either their alternative analysis or their commercial terms. And the reason we do the estimation, the validation, and the MSOs is to build some robustness of this deal, so we have some facts to play with. And so our response is, okay, I hear you. Their speed might be faster. How about all these other things? I hear you. You want a lower price. How can we move on these other things?
It's funny because oftentimes we're looking at negotiation as tips and tricks and flinching and all kinds of funny little things, when really this whole process is just trying to help us understand what they really want and then delivering that. And also in return, getting what we want. At the end of the day, it's just developing a process that's going to make it much more easy for you to figure out what they want and how you can still get what you want.
And the problem is, though, there was a great blog on this recently about the fact that most buyers are buying suboptimally. So they kind of know what they want, but they're making terrible decisions. They're comparing you to alternatives. Yeah. They're making decisions on one or two criteria that aren't that relevant. So it's the seller's role. We have got to get that decision tight before we talk about commercial terms. If we don't know why us, perceived or real value, we've got to punch why us. We're going to get beat up on commercial terms. We're only going to get a price premium or a risk reduction in a deal when there's a reason for them to choose us over somebody else, right? And so that's the thing, is that people approach this subject emotionally and with tricks. And I like to say that facts trump tricks every time. And you're right. This entire process is about estimating the facts of their alternative, going and doing guided discovery against those facts, building those facts into offers, and then countering those value dividing tactics with other facts, right? And that's really, and it's not that tricky. Again, there's not that many moving parts of competitive analysis and commercial terms analysis when you're getting this late in the game. It's coming down to a few key people and a few key criteria and a few key commercial terms.
I mean, you probably have a tool bag full of all these things that you could do it, but by this time you've already figured out which tools you're going to need in order to make this deal move forward.
Yeah.
And you've presented them in 3 different offers.
Yep.
And then the divide part is really you have your low offer, you have your high offer, you have an offer in the middle, but that one's not quite right. And the deal is always going to happen with the 4th offer, which is probably going to mirror the middle offer, but with some specifics.
I think that's fair. And there's still, one would say, hey, if these multiple solution ideas is so great, why are you still getting this? I can get the same thing cheaper on the back end. You're going to lessen the probability of that happening. And when they do it, it's going to be more of a game that they're playing than, because you should have educated them enough. They should be aware of why you versus someone else and what you're worth. So, they're still going to play it. They can't help themselves. It's still likely to happen when you're building that 4th option, is they're going to try to say, well, I'm not going to pay this much because they're faster on, again, speed to market or something. And it's like, okay, let's go back to all the other things.
But now you have a tool bags of things you can fiddle with and dials you can pull.
Yep.
Instead of just reacting with, well, maybe we should discount it just a little bit. You actually have some other things you can play with because you've laid them all out and you know which ones are important.
Yeah. I would add to that is we call this changing the conversation. This is back to the anchoring thing. They're going to have conversations with us about same thing in price. And we need to completely ignore that, right? And not in a rude way, but we ignore it by going back to the facts about whether it's same thing or not, the fact about whether, we are only talking about price. And so we really, if in absence of doing this planning that we've talked about up front, the probability of us reacting to their conversation, which is not the one we want to have. They want to have a conversation about the price of a product. We want to have a conversation about the value of the solution. And if we have the data on that, that's a much less likelihood that we're going to be in reactive mode. And when they throw that stuff at us, it should sort of bounce off our shield and be able to come back to our facts. This is the notion of being better prepared for them on what that alternative looks like for them, and being better prepared than them on a total commercial term strategy, not just, what's my pricing strategy, but the total holistic look at the commercial terms.
So there you go. I can see it now. Like if you've already got all the tools out and you're ready to move, it's like, they're like, we need a cheaper price. You're like, okay, no problem. So we taking this off the table or are we moving this down?
Yeah, there's no, but you just
it's like, because you already know what to do. You're like,
yep.
Well, we got a few variables here we can play with. It just makes your confidence so much stronger too, which probably makes them nervous.
Well, but you just hit it. Even though we call this strategic negotiation, we still have to have this tactical dialogue where they're literally firing real bullets at us. And you just gave the two prescriptions. One is, sure, we can get to that price by pulling some of this value out, or we can get to that price by massaging the commercial terms. And that this tactic, because that's the dialogue, and the words are all going to be different, but every new customer we sign up, we survey their sales teams and say, what do you hear on a daily basis from customers that knocks you back on your heels? In fact, we did a 2-year, 19-country study on this, and all the words are different, but they all fall into those two buckets. The only reason it's 97% is there's 3% of what people said, the customers said or did, that we didn't understand. So we're like, I don't know which bucket to put this in, because this feedback came from someone who had English as a second or third language, and I didn't get it. But by and large, we already know 6 or 9 months out what's going to happen across the table. And this entire thing is changing that conversation from some version of same thing, cheaper, or you guys are so much more difficult to deal with than all your competitors. It's the same thing, comparing you to the alternative and beating you up on maybe legal T's and C's or something. That's, those are the two buckets. So, or they just choose one bucket, which is a commercial term. It's not my budget, lower your price, blah, blah, blah. So, but it's the same. You said it. The way to move is to go back to that solution and either move things in and out of it, or back to the commercial terms and massage the commercial terms in adjusting to the thing they're asking for.
Somebody listens to this and starts making changes and starts doing, walking through the process of estimating, signaling and validating, creating value, and then dividing value. What could they expect to see as a result of doing this the right way?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned confidence before. Well, two things. Let me be objective for you. The first time, maybe the first time you ever tried to paint a painting, it was terrible. By the fourth painting you painted, you got better, right? And I do this a lot with home projects that I end up doing twice, and the second time's usually better. So that's going to happen. The first time you estimate, the first time you run a validation meeting, the first time you build multiple offers, the first time you try to counter tactics, you're going to be better prepared if you do this for 20 minutes than not preparing at all. But it still isn't going to be super pretty. By the second or third or fourth time you've done it, you can expect, as you said, it's courage. You use confidence. One of my partners uses courage all the time. It gives us courage. We know where the conversation is going to go already. We have a lot of data. We have a plan in place to react. When they say something to us, it just needs to go in our brain to go alternative and concession, or just concession. All right, let's have the dialogue. We already know what's going to happen, and your courage goes way up,
which is valuable just by itself.
Yeah. Another one of my consultants said, without the lack of a plan, people go in selling scared or negotiating scared. People believe in the deal coaching that we've done all over the world, even with deal pursuit teams who are supposed to be experts in this, they always start by believing the customer has more power. And I hear this over and over again from reps, from VPs, from deal pursuit teams, because the buyer can buy whatever they want. And the reality is, we do analysis of power based on that customer's alternative and how you meet their needs at higher confidence and lower risk. And the reality is that most B2B deals are kind of shared power, 60-40, 50-50 kind of thing. It's rare that one side has all the power. I worked with a medical or with physicians, buyers for physicians who some physicians prefer this hip replacement, and that's it. They call them physician preferred items. And so the buyer had no choice. I only could buy Dan's hip because, Dan's hip replacement thing because the physician wanted it, right? So in that case, the buyer has kind of no power because, and that was their frustration with me. How do I deal with those are rare. There are some sellers that have a brand new widget that's better than everybody else at this moment in time, and then sellers are going to have, a ton of power. There's instances where you're selling something that's commoditized and buyers are going to have a ton more. That's not the average. The average is there's shared power in most. And when you get these facts, you can see that shared power. And that's, again, where that courage comes from, right? You can leverage that courage and that shared power when you're getting into that divide value discussion.
One thing I've heard you say before is that when people walk through this negotiation process the right way and even hone it and get better at it, not only can they increase their win rate, but the average deal size usually goes up quite substantially. Yep. And I'm like, imagine you win on both those fronts. That's a lot more revenue.
Well, and it's interesting too, because sort of our latest thinking, win rate for sure. And just in the last few days, we've been talking about, it's actually deal quality, because it's not always just size. It's are they buying the right stuff from us in the right way? Do we have access to the executives for quarterly meetings so we can make sure the renewal goes smoothly? All those kinds of things. So it's win rate and overall. I didn't even
think about that.
Overall
your
deal
lifetime
quality.
value goes way up.
Yep.
Customer service is usually better, so your costs go down.
Yep.
It's a big deal.
And it makes the renewal a ton easier when that's happening. Yes.
So that's how you become a cash producing company, a cash cow, right? When you get everything ironed out, including your strategic negotiation process. But this key part, and it's a lot. After walking through this whole process, I'm like, there's a lot to consider. It's small enough that it can be done as a one-man band, jotting stuff down on a piece of paper and then rearranging a few things on a telephone call. But it's robust enough that it can handle, multi-million-dollar deals.
Here's the
value
simple
in it.
Yeah, the simple version, Dan, that I would leave people with is this approach to negotiation it's 3 questions. The first question is, what are the consequences to them if they don't reach agreement with us, right? You estimate that and you validate against it. The second question is, what does a great deal look like for both sides if we do reach agreement? So the first question is about what happens to them if we don't reach agreement. The second one is, what does a great deal look like for both sides? We estimate all the commercial terms and build in MSOs. And the third question is, can we prepare 3 paths forward? And you can take, again, 15 minutes answering those 3 questions before a call, sitting in your car in the parking lot before you go in, and you're going to be way better prepared, right, than if you don't. Or you can take 3 weeks with multiple people in multiple meetings to really work through this. It all depends on the size of the deal, how much time you have, that kind of thing. But 3 questions. This is not 19 tips, 17 effective responses, personality analysis. Where do you sit at the table? What happens to both sides if you don't agree? What's a great deal look like if you do? And can I prepare 3 paths forward? If you do that for 15 minutes, you're way better prepared than the other side.
Hopefully you've heard this. You've walked through all 4. You're taking some notes, and you're going to go back and implement some of this with your team so you can win more deals, win bigger deals, and win deals that actually stick around for much longer. Brian, thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks, Dan.